Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chairman be authorized to declare a recess at any time during the committee hearing. Without objection, show that ordered. I ask for unanimous consent that the members on the subcommittee, not on the subcommittee, be permitted to sit in the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions without objection. Show that ordered. As a reminder, if members insert a document into the record. Here's where you send it. Email it to documents, TI, at mail.house.gov. Okay, now recognize myself for the purpose of an opening statement for 5 minutes. I will meet today to review the fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Federal Maritime Transportation Programs administered by the Maritime Administration and the Federal Maritime Commission. Welcome to all our guests. We're Admiral Ann Phillips, Administrator of the Maritime Administration, and the Honorable Dan Mayfie, Chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission. First, I'd like to thank both of your agencies for their efforts and coordination with other relevant agencies to ensure the continued operation of maritime commerce in the aftermath of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore. While recovering efforts continue, it is important that we also maintain stable trade flows. So we thank you for your assistance in the maritime industry. Thank you both for doing that. MARID is a promotional agency within the Department of Transportation responsible for fostering, promoting, and developing the maritime industry of the United States. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget request for MARID includes $59.7 million for the administration of the programs that strengthen our national security and economy, train our future mariner workforce, and build a more efficient maritime transportation system. Among these programs is the Port Infrastructure Development Program, known as PIDP, a discretionary grant program to fund infrastructure projects that improve the safety, efficiency, and reliability of the movement of goods at coastal seaports, inland river ports, and Great Lakes ports. The President's budget request includes $80 million for this program, which is in addition to the $450 million in the advanced appropriations the program receives annually through the fiscal year 2026 in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. PIDP has grown exponentially since it first appropriated funds in fiscal year 2019. Unfortunately, this growth comes with administrative challenges that severely impact the effectiveness of the program. These include long delays for grant recipients in getting grant contracts signed, which slows the obligation of funds and leaves project scopes vulnerable to inflationary pressures. These delays harm the program's ability to improve our ports. I look forward to discussing ways we can streamline this process to ensure that the program is carried out as efficiently as possible. MARID also oversees the Deepwater Port Licensing Program, which provides permits for the construction of ports in waters off the shore of the United States. While prolonged timeline for processing these permits is an ongoing issue, I'm encouraged that MARID's recent approval of an application for construction of the Deepwater Port off the coast of Texas. However, I remain concerned that there are several other applications waiting for the decision that are far beyond the 356-day statutory timeline for review. I hope to work on merits to ensure all applications are processed in a timely fashion as required by law, and I continue to work with my colleagues to correct the long-term administration of this important program. Lastly, the subcommittee remains interested in the study currently underway that will inform National Maritime Strategy. I hope to hear how MARID is working with the federally funded Research and Development Center, conducting the study to ensure it serves as a helpful tool in the needed revitalization of our maritime industry. Additionally, we have the chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission, or FMC, with us today to discuss the state of the ocean shipping industry and their ongoing work implementing the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, known as OSRA. FMC is an independent agency responsible for the regulation and ocean-borne transportation in the foreign commerce of the United States. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget request includes $48.5 million to fund the salaries and capital needs of FMC. The supply chain crisis caused by COVID-19 dramatically increased ocean shipping costs while congesting ports and impairing maritime trade flow. In response, Congress enacted the tasked FMC with implementing OSRA to help address many of the challenges experienced by the United States exporters. FMC has worked diligently since the enactment of OSRA to implement its enhanced authorities, and I look forward to hearing from Chairman Maffei today at the status of the FMC's efforts. Thank you both for appearing here. I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Carvajal, for an opening statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll yield to our ranking member of our T&I committee. But before I do that, I see some young people that have come to our hearing. I see a lot of members of Congress over there in the corner to be in the future. I wanted to recognize them before I turn it over to our ranking member, Larson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair, for scheduling today's hearing to review the fiscal year 25 budget request of the Maritime Administration and the FMC. Together, these agencies promote the U.S. It must have been something Carvajal said. Together, these agencies promote the U.S. maritime industry and protect consumers against unfair shipping practices. Ocean shipping is dominated by foreign shipping companies who transport over 98% of imports and exports. Between pandemic-related supply chain issues and ongoing international conflicts, we've learned the importance of a vibrant U.S. maritime industry. And now is the time to strengthen and support that industry. The President's fiscal year 25 budget request includes, though, an 11% decrease in discretionary funds for the Maritime Administration and a 21% increase for the Federal Maritime Commission. While the funding request for the FMC will ensure fairness for American shippers and consumers, I'm concerned MARAD will not have the resources it needs to support a robust supply chain. Investment in the U.S. maritime industry is long overdue. And for years, we've faced a mariner shortage as workers retire and the industry struggles to appeal to younger Americans. To attract new workers, we must strengthen education and training as well as ensure good wages and a robust job market for those entering the industry. I am disappointed the President's budget includes a 35% cut in funding for the Port Infrastructure Development Program. While there remains robust funding for the program as a result of advance appropriations included in the bipartisan infrastructure law, it was never in the intent of Congress for that funding to supplant regular appropriations. Infrastructure investments in seaports provide opportunities to bolster our economy, strengthen the supply chain, create and sustain jobs, and enhance our international competitiveness. In my own district, the Swinomish Port Authority, a small port and one of a few tribal-run port authorities, recently received an $11 million grant to fund a master plan for the port and to begin design and engineering of a new commercial pier. So you can see the local and regional impacts of this funding is immeasurable. Small ports are lifelines to local communities and are a critical part of the supply chain that can ease congestion at larger ports. That is why robust funding must be provided for small ports through the PIDP. I'm pleased that the President's budget request includes $20 million for the Small Shipyard Grant Program. I have several small shipyards in my district, and I've seen how these grants can be used to create jobs and bolster the local and national economy. I'd be remiss if I did not bring up Admiral Phillips' ongoing work to address the sexual assault and sexual harassment at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, the state maritime academies, and across the commercial industry. Sexual assault and harassment have no place in society, and every mariner deserves respect and deserves to feel safe at sea. I want to commend Admiral Phillips and the MARAD for their work in awarding the bipartisan infrastructure law funding as well. I look forward to seeing what projects are selected this fall. And finally, in last Congress, this committee passed the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, and under Chairman Maffei's leadership, good to see you again, Chairman Maffei, the Federal Maritime Commission has been quick to implement new requirements for ocean carriers and investigate unfair shipping practices. The Federal Maritime Commission will require more funding and personnel to fully address the new investigative and prosecutorial authorities provided under the law, and I am heartened to see the President understands this and included in his budget request a 21% increase for the FMC. Since passage of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, container prices have fallen, vessel backlogs have eased, and the FMC has revamped the reporting process, making it easier for shippers to file complaints. And currently, the FMC is monitoring the shipping fees and surcharges associated with shipping disruptions in the Red Sea and drought conditions in the Panama Canal. Congress has asked a lot of the FMC, and the President's budget request recognizes the need for increased funding. Look forward to engaging our witnesses on both MARAD's and FMC's ongoing work to strengthen our supply chain and to grow the U.S. commercial maritime fleet. And with that, thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Carvajal.
Thank you, Chair Webster, for scheduling today's hearing on the review of the fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Maritime Administration, MARAD, and the Federal Maritime Commission, FMC. I look forward to hearing from Chair Maffei and Administrator Phillips on the President's budget request and their agency's priorities for the upcoming year. Stability in the international shipping is integral to a strong economy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, weaknesses in our supply chain were amplified as landside port congestion and unfair shipping practices by foreign ocean carriers led to backlogs and price increases. This in turn contributed, no doubt, to inflation. Tasked with ensuring fairness in international shipping, the FMC has key authorities which allows it to safeguard transparent and equitable maritime commerce. The reforms in the Bipartisan Ocean Shipping Reform Act, which passed out of this subcommittee last Congress before becoming law, strengthened the FMC's authority to investigate unfair ocean shipping carrier fees and facilitate the efficient movement of cargo through U.S. ports. In the 2 years since passage of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, the FMC has worked expeditiously to utilize their new authorities, establish new regulations around detention and demurrage billing practices, and as a result, have made international shipping more fair for American shippers. It is important that the FMC is sufficiently funded so that it can properly continue to carry out these reforms which benefit American businesses and consumers alike. That is why I am happy to see an $8 million increase in the President's budget request for the FMC. Beyond a fair shipping process, the U.S. economy depends upon a robust maritime industry. I fear that without continued support for our U.S. flag fleet, fair shipping practices will only get us so far. The U.S. merchant marine is shrinking, and availability of American merchant mariners is dwindling. This puts our sea lift capabilities, national defense, and economy in jeopardy. More and more, we rely on foreign ocean carriers to transport our goods. It is MARAD's responsibility to promote a vibrant maritime industry. I expect to hear today how we can revitalize the American maritime industry. Unfortunately, the fiscal year 2024 appropriations resulted in a substantial cut to merit discretionary programs meant to support the industry. I worry about the precedent this has created as the fiscal year 25 funding request follows this downward spiral or trend. Merit oversees vital grant programs that fund projects to modernize our infrastructure, including the Maritime Environmental and Technical Assistance Program, or META, and the Port Infrastructure Development Program. The President budget request includes $6 million for META, which is a $1.5 million decrease over the last year's budget. This is disappointing, to say the least. Decreases over 2 years are not the trend we want to see. This program supports the research, development, and deployment of new technology in the maritime industry, particularly low or zero carbon technologies. These technologies are crucial for reducing harmful emissions and protecting our public health and the environment, especially for port communities where air pollution is statistically worse. We must continue to invest in these programs that foster innovation, not only to address climate change, but also to make the United States a leader in this new technology. The Port Infrastructure Development Program, referred to as PIDP, also supports decarbonization projects, which help reduce emissions and build a more resilient, reliable transportation system. Yet, despite the importance of this program, we saw a substantial decrease in FY24 funding, and the fiscal year 25 budget request follows suit. I am heartened to see an increase in funding for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Administrator Phillips has done an excellent job continuing to pursue systematic change to the culture that has resulted in sexual violence and harassment at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and in the commercial maritime industry. This issue is of the utmost importance, and while our work is not done, I commend your leadership efforts to make the maritime industry a safe and desirable workplace for all. Thank you to our witnesses and attendees for your participation today. I look forward to a robust discussion about how the 2025 budget request can support investments in improving the U.S. marine transportation system. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I know both of our witnesses are fully aware of the lighting system we have. Green means go, yellow means slow down, and red means time to wrap it up. So with that, ask unanimous consent that the witness' full statements be included in the record. Without objection, show that ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open for such time as the witness have to provide answers to questions that may be submitted to them in writing. Without objection, show that ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments or information submitted by its members or the witnesses to be, to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, show that ordered. So as the written testimony has been made a part of the record, the committee asks that you limit your remarks to 5 minutes. And with that, Admiral Phillips, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Webster, and Ranking Member Carbajal, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for your tremendous support for the Maritime Administration, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and the U.S. maritime industry. I'm honored to testify before you today and being joined by Federal Maritime Commission Chair Dan Maffei. Before I go further, allow me to express our condolences on behalf of the Department of Transportation to the families of those who lost their lives in March when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. MARAD's mission is to foster, promote, and develop the maritime industry of the United States to meet the nation's economic and security needs. The President's budget for FY 2025 requests $859.7 million for MARAD. It includes the Port Infrastructure Development Program, requesting $80 million for PIDP to enhance port infrastructure, stimulate economic growth, improve safety, address climate change and environmental justice, and strengthen supply chains. The bipartisan infrastructure law also provides advance appropriations for this program in 2025. Last year, Marriott awarded more than $653 million in PIDP grants and awards to 41 projects in 25 states and 1 territory. This year, thanks again to the BIL and funding provided in the 2024 appropriations measure, $500 million in funding is available for PIDP grants. An additional $72 million in FY 2024 appropriations has already been congressionally directed to 22 projects. Applications for this program closed May 10th this year. The 2025 budget requests $10 million for the United States Marine Highway Program to support marine supply chains and offer cost-effective transportation for U.S. shippers and manufacturers. Marriott awarded nearly $12 million in marine highway projects in 2023. In 2024, $5 million in funding is available. The 2025 budget also requests $20 million for Marriott small shipyard grants to improve infrastructure at small U.S. shipyards, enhancing their efficiency and competitiveness for commercial ship construction and maintenance. $8.5 million is available in 2024. Applications close May 8th. Within Marriott's FY 2025 budget request, $6 million will support the Maritime Environmental and Technical Assistance Program, and $3.7 million supports the Federal Ship Financing Program, Title 11. When combined with the FY 24 appropriation for Title 11 of $53 million, this will support $1.3 billion in outstanding loan guarantees. The President's FY 25 budget also requests $191 million to support the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and enable Marriott to continue to address the urgent and longstanding challenges at the Academy. This includes support for 975 midshipmen, 293 faculty and staff, funding for facility maintenance, and for 21 new positions to implement congressionally directed NAPA recommendations, as well as address facility maintenance and repair needs and academic needs, and aid in implementing the Embark program. Marriott continues to expand Embark participation. Today, there are 21 commercial operators enrolled, which operate over 180 vessels. We are working to develop a proposed Embark rule pursuant to the FY23 NDAA. Also included in the 25 budget for the Merchant Marine Academy is $86 million for capital improvements, including barracks renovations, Wiley Hall renovations for classrooms and offices, and Delano Hall, the dining hall and galley renovations, in addition to rehabilitation of roads, sidewalks, and parking lots, and addressing longstanding deferred maintenance. The 2025 budget also requests $87 million to support the 6 state maritime academies, covering school ship maintenance and repair, student incentive program, direct SMA support, fuel assistance, and NSMV pre- and post-delivery support. 4 NSMVs remain under construction. The Empire State was delivered last fall. The second ship, Patriot State, will be delivered this summer to Massachusetts Maritime Academy. The state of Maine was launched earlier this month. Our government-owned Sealift fleet is supported by privately owned, commercially operated U.S. flag vessels in the maritime security and tanker security programs. The FY 2025 budget requests the full authorization of $318 million for MSP, which is the heart of sustainment Sealift. Marriott has also fully implemented the 10-vessel tanker security program and is requesting $60 million for that program. The budget in 2025 requests $974 million from DoD for Marriott to acquire, upgrade, and maintain vessels in the NDRF and RRF. These funds ensure the fleet remains ready, reliable, and responsive, using commercial ship managers and crewed by U.S. mariners. In addition, Marriott continues to collaborate with stakeholders to address the mariner shortage and recently convened on March 20th the first NDAA-directed Maritime Workforce Working Group. Our next meeting is May 8th. These programs reflect Marriott's priorities, supported by the President's budget. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, appreciate that. And now we have Chairman Maffei. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Carbajal, full committee, Ranking Member Larson, distinguished members of the subcommittee. America's importers and exporters must adapt to rapidly changing circumstances around the world. They deserve a Federal Maritime Commission that also adapts to the challenges affecting cost, availability, reliability, and competitiveness in ocean shipping. While I am chair of the FMC, I am fortunate to share decision-making with 4 other very devoted commissioners, including Lou Sola and Max Vekich, who are here today sitting behind me. I want to thank all of my colleagues on the commission, along with the dedicated professional staff, and the clear message from both the President and both parties in Congress. Because of these, the FMC has rapidly changed course to meet pressing ocean shipping policy challenges. Informed by our experience during the COVID pandemic and empowered by the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, or OSRA, as the chairman mentioned, The Commission is more active than ever and increasingly serving as a venue that shippers turn to for assistance. Since June 2022, our Consumer Affairs Office has responded to roughly 2,400 requests for assistance and continues to serve dozens of callers every week. The number of complaints filed with the FMC already this year is on pace to exceed last year, and matters brought before an FMC administrative law judge are triple what they were in 2019. Even 2 years after the end of the COVID-linked supply chain problems, the demand for FMC services remains high among American importers and exporters, a sign that they value the FMC's ability to resolve their concerns and have a positive impact on their businesses. When it comes to enforcing rules on cargo carriers, the FMC has gone from slow steaming to full speed ahead. In a short time, the FMC has built a robust enforcement capability, pursuing cases against even the most well-resourced potential violators. Our enforcement program has gone from assessing virtually no penalties in FY 2020 and FY 2021 to assessing $2 million in penalties in fiscal year 2022 and nearly $2.9 million in FY 23. So far in FY 24, we are on pace to either meet or exceed last year's total. Foreign-based ocean vessel operators are paying the bulk of these penalties. In addition to enhanced enforcement, the FMC has implemented or made significant progress with all of OSRA's mandates. This includes building on the incentive principle interpretive rule. This rule, authored by Commissioner Rebecca Dye and put into effect in 2020, established that a detention or demurrage charge must help promote the efficient movement of cargo and/or equipment, and it can't be for any other purpose. In February, the FMC unanimously approved a final bill on detention and demurrage practices. This rule sets requirements for how common carriers and marine terminal operators must bill these charges and provides clarity on who can be billed, within what time frame, and the process for disputing bills. The rule is slated to take effect on May 28th. Now, I would note here that the World Shipping Council, the group that represents the largest foreign-based shipping carriers, has appealed this new rule, contending that it exceeds the FMC's authority. I maintain this tough but fair rule is fully in line with the letter of the law as well as the intent of Congress in OSRA. The FMC is working hard to complete the 3 other required rulemakings. I anticipate there will be an announcement on unreasonable refusal to deal within the next few months and one on shipping exchange registries by the fall. The OSRA charge complaints process continues to be a popular avenue for shippers to seek expedited relief from improper bills and invoices. Since June 2022, almost $2.5 million in charges and fees have been waived or refunded by common carriers. The FMC has largely delivered on the investment started when OSRA was signed almost 2 years ago. That said, we still have much to do in order to complete the changes and to ensure American importers and exporters have ongoing access to reliable, efficient, and affordable ocean transportation. The Commission's budget request for FY 2025 is the same amount, approximately, that OSRA 2022 authorized. The FMC has established priorities and built plans based on OSRA. Funding at less than that will hamper our capacity to meet existing expectations. Recent events such as those in the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Port of Baltimore are illustrative of the type of uncertainties that hit global shipping on an ongoing basis. Geopolitical events, shifting carrier alliances, new international regulations, and changes in trade policy and supply chain sourcing will continue to affect ocean-borne commerce in unpredictable ways. A strong and engaged Federal Maritime Commission is vital for ensuring some stability for American businesses and consumers in a world filled with uncertainty. Thank you again for allowing me to testify along with Admiral Phillips, and I look forward to addressing your questions.
Thank you so much. So now, thank you for both of you for your testimony. Now turn to questions. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Admiral Phillips, the Port Infrastructure Development Program has grown exponentially in size and scope over the last several years. Unfortunately, the effectiveness of the program is being restricted by long delays to get contracts in place, which means funds can't be obligated, construction can't begin, and inflation impacts the project cost. What is Merit doing to address these inefficiencies in the grant award process?
Sir, thank you for that question. As you are aware, we have quite a number of grants underway right now, and we're excited about them because of the generational change they offer. We're working very diligently within our system to bring our timeline down so that we can ensure grant applicants get their money as soon as possible. Our current average time to work through both the NEPA process, the environmental assessment process, and the grant agreement process, which is basically scope, schedule, performance, is 20 months. We'd like to get that down to 12. We continue to work very closely with applicants to help provide them additional capacity in advance of the application and OFO process each year. We offer a series of online events for applicants to be able to spend time with us and understand what's coming. And then once we receive and award applicants, we meet with each applicant individually to begin the process to understand where they are in their process and how they can move forward. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have opportunities within the PIDP program under new authority from 2022 to do what we call a pre-award authority, which allows applicants to draw down from their matching funds to begin to start pre-award processes. They can use this money for planning, for hiring additional staff, and for doing engineering and design work. We have found that of the applicants that take advantage of this, and about 58% of the grants since 2022 have been able to do that we have much more success in moving them quickly through the program. I would add finally that the record is 6 months in getting to grant agreement signing and NEPA completion, and we have had a number of applicants be able to complete it within 1 year. So it is possible to do it, and we continue to work with applicants to help work them through the process. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, and please keep me informed as you work through the award process. And also, Admiral Phillips, the Deepwater Port Licensing Program continues to have several applications that are far beyond the statutory timeline for review, 536 days, 56 days. As the President's budget requested for fiscal years 2025, include 4 new full-time positions for Deepwater Port Program Office. Will this be sufficient to help Merit process the backlog of applications, or are there other challenges that we need to check into?
Sir, thank you for that question, and thank you for considering the request for 4 additional positions. My staff of 4 are actually here with me today. And so certainly those 4 additional billets will help move along the applications that we have right now. But to remind, we work with over 20 different federal and state departments and agencies to complete this process. Particularly in the initial application process, we work closely with the Coast Guard under the environmental review requirements, which they manage predominantly until we get to the record of decision, which is MARAD's responsibility. So it is quite a coordination effort, and we certainly appreciate and understand the law and the timeline and want to be able to follow the law, as we have said we will do, and move these projects forward. So as you commented, sir, the spot license was issued this year. I would note that's the first license issued for a new application since the early 80s, other than the Loop application, which shifted from an import to an export facility in 2012. So this, there's quite a bit of additional interest in this program now, and we appreciate your interest in it and your willingness to consider our 2025 request.
Thank you, and I hope to work with you as more decisions are issued this year. Chairman Mathey, stakeholders have expressed concern with the FMC extending its jurisdiction beyond regulated entities, such as ocean common carriers or maritime terminal operators, to other groups that are regulated entities have contracts with. Do you believe your jurisdiction extends to the assets and operations of these either groups, and or whenever a regulated entity enters into a contract with them, do you think?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Our statute makes it clear that the 3 types of regulated entities are common carriers that own vessels, non-vessel operating common carriers, and marine terminal operators. That said, though, our jurisdiction goes along with the box from the water. So if services are provided that involve that box and the shipper's ability, the American shipper's ability to interact with that box, then we have jurisdiction over those three kinds of companies and the way that they may make their deals and what is presented to the ocean shipper. So no, our jurisdiction is very circumscribed, but it does include anything that involves what those three categories of folks do while they're doing ocean shipping.
Thank you so much. I yield back. My time's gone. Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral Phillips, I'd like to commend you on your ongoing commitment to ensuring a safe environment for all mariners on board ships. The culture of industry is changing. We've seen measurable improvements on board vessels, and the Coast Guard is taking action to remove and prosecute offenders. However, new requirements resulting from Embark and the Safer Seas Act only apply to U.S. flagged vessels. Could you detail how safety standards, including those related to sexual assault and sexual harassment, does not apply to foreign mariners on board flag of convenience vessels?
Congressman, thank you for that question. Of course, MARAD's focus is U.S. flag vessels, and we are most concerned with the safety of our midshipmen sailing as cadets at sea and the safety of U.S. mariners. And in that context, we work very closely with the Coast Guard. From the context of how foreign flag vessels are managed, that is outside of my purview and outside of the law. And I commend Congress for considering that and thinking of it. And I would also add that many other foreign nations have considered such circumstances with regard to vessels that call their ports that may or not be flagged in their country, and have implemented opportunities to ensure that those mariners are treated fairly and paid fairly and are also subject to a safe environment. So there are perhaps some foreign models that could be followed if that is an item of Congress's interest.
Does the IMO have a role here, and has anybody engaged the IMO on this issue?
Yes, sir. The IMO does have a role, and of course, state is lead for IMO, with Coast Guard as the lead agency involved in most of in fact, all of the committees involving mariner safety, mariner welfare, and including decarbonization and other requirements for vessels at sea. And so certainly there is a great interest in the IMO and mariner safety, and I would defer to the Coast Guard for the specific details there. We do know they had a session just this summer where they looked at mariner safety broadly across the industry, and also looked at sexual assault prevention and response and other kinds of harassment and challenges that mariners are experiencing at sea in an international context.
Thank you. Admiral Phillips, as you say in your testimony, without cargo, ships will leave the U.S. fleet. While I appreciate Merit's education efforts, the law is very clear. Merit is the final authority in ensuring compliance with cargo preference. It is unacceptable that 40% of agencies have failed to provide you with bills of lading. Cargo preference is the shipping version of Buy America. When should Congress expect to see the final rule on cargo preference that ensures Merit's oversight and enforcement authorities?
So thank you for that question. We continue to work on the final rule and understand Congress's intent and interest there, and certainly acknowledge that we are behind the due date of 270 days from the 2023 NDAA. I would add, in the context of MARAD being able to receive bills of lading, it would be helpful to receive them in advance, and we only receive them after the fact and have to chase them down. As you well know, that is a challenge. And of course, an easy way to make cargo preference more direct to implement would be to go to 100% cargo preference, notwithstanding that there are agencies who find challenges in that, which we certainly understand. And in that context, I would add, we thank Congress for waiving the 3-year wait requirement to flag in and have access to preference cargoes, and would say that implementing that sooner than 2030 would be helpful as well in this regard. It would give more access to preferred cargo vessel carrying capacity for those agencies which are challenged when they have to ship things in an emergent manner, like USAID and USDA. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chairman Maffei, in your statement you mentioned the FMC worked to proactively contact carriers during shipping disruptions like those associated with the Red Sea, the Port of Baltimore, and the Panama Canal. How is that work important for shippers, particularly small shippers, who may find it more burdensome to negotiate contracts and challenge fees?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Carbajal. What we have is called an audit program. It essentially is a way to have a continuing dialogue with ocean carriers and continue to ask them. Now, they do have to volunteer for the program, but all of them have. It is important that we question them on a number of things. The particular issue, and we found this out in having a hearing of our own, with these charges was the lack of transparency. A lot of the charges, it wasn't so much that the shipper said, well, there's no cost here. They understood there was an additional cost, for instance, if you couldn't go through the Suez Canal. But what they didn't understand is what this new fund was going for. And so we've been encouraging them to have a better relationship, better transparency. This is particularly important for the small shipper, as you mentioned. The larger shippers, they have that bargaining power that they can just demand those answers, but the smaller shipper really does not. So that is what we're doing. It has been somewhat successful, though I do think that it is a matter still for discussion about whether all of these charges are completely kosher, for lack of a better term, and we certainly will investigate any allegations that they're not being used for their express purpose, that is involving that particular maritime contingency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Larson, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Well, yeah. Azell.
You're the chair.
Okay. Mr. Azell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Phillips, and thank you for being here today, and both of you appreciate your commitment. Admiral Phillips, as you know, my Gulf Coast colleague and I, Congressman Troy Carter, and I introduced legislation to expand MARAD's Capital Construction Fund program. This expansion would give marine terminal operators access to deposit funds into the tax-deferred CCF account for purchases of cargo handling equipment. When Secretary Buttigieg testified before the full T&I committee last year, he said if Congress authorized our CCF expansion bill, he'd fully implement it. I was very pleased to hear the department's support. Can you explain how programs such as CCF complement programs such as PIDP and work to leverage private investment into our U.S. maritime transportation system?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. The Capital Construction Fund program, as you point out, is a fund into which vessel owners or operators may deposit profits based on the profits generated by that vessel, and then after a period of time, remove those profits from that fund, which actually is an IRS-operated program. We just manage it, and then we pass the information to the IRS. They can take that money back out, and they can use it to either build a new vessel or improve a vessel, improve maintenance, et cetera. So it's been a very successful program, and with the changes in the 2023 NDAA, it's become even more successful because it now includes a much wider range of vessels that may participate, and there are no geographic restrictions. So we have seen a tremendous uptick in that particular program's functionality. It serves really to support the maritime industry and the shipbuilding industry broadly in the country. Its connection to port infrastructure development would be really loosely tied to increased capacity in our shipbuilding industry to support moving the goods that come and go from port infrastructure. There's not a direct tie there. That said, I'm aware of your legislation and, of course, and understand your intent in trying to find ways for terminal operators to purchase equipment and take advantage of such a tax-deferred fund. It would be interesting to try to implement it in exactly the same way as the fund is currently administered. However, we're happy to work with your staff to try to better understand the objectives and find a way forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The state of Mississippi is home to Taylor Machine Works, United States' largest manufacturer of wheeled cargo handling equipment. I believe securing America's supply chain is a matter of national security. Can you explain to us why it is important to support efforts to rebuild manufacturing industry, especially as it relates to supply chains in the U.S. maritime industry? Admiral, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, thank you. So as you're well aware, in the context of port infrastructure development, we are very interested in, and the Small Shipyard Grant Program, we're very interested in port cargo handling equipment that is built in this country. There are manufacturers, and we are happy to understand where they are and who they are, and grateful for the kinds of things that they do. And I would add in that context, we're working now with the American Association of Port Authorities on a survey that's surveying terminal operators around the country to understand what kinds of port equipment they need, and then surveying equipment manufacturers to understand what kinds of equipment they make, to try to understand where we can build capacity and increase manufacturing and good-paying jobs in this country. So we thank you for your interest there, sir, and are excited to get on with the study with APA so that we can help continue to build industry opportunities in this country for the port infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Admiral, as we work towards fiscal year 2025 appropriations, I want to discuss the Small Shipyard Grant Program, which received a large funding cut in FY24 appropriations bill. Considering the current state of U.S. shipbuilding, can you discuss the need to fund this program at or above the level included in the President's budget request?
Yes, sir, certainly. So there's $20 million in the President's budget request for 2025. But as you state, this is a very significant program. It is always oversubscribed. Typically, for $20 million in grants available, we'll receive more than $80 million in requests, funding requests, and I would expect this year we will easily exceed the funds available, and probably by a factor of 3 or 4. So there's certainly a need, a consistent need over time, and we see tremendous benefit from this program. Not only does it provide additional capacity for small shipyards, but it generally improves their employment as well.
Thank you for that, and thank you both again. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Now, the ranking member, Mr. Larson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First question is for Chairman Fay, but I apologize for not recognizing the third greatest export out of Aberdeen, Washington, Commissioner Max Bekich. Of course, number 1 and number 2 happen to be 2/3 of the members of Nirvana, so you'll always be number 3 in our hearts, Max. Good to see you. Chairman Fay, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go up to Baltimore, see the bridge collapse and the ongoing recovery and salvage efforts. It's really hard to fathom the magnitude of the incident without seeing it in person, and I know the chairman went as well. A few others have gone up there to see it. Can you talk about the effect this incident's having on supply chains and the importance of, well, just generally the importance of a redundant supply chain?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Larson. I just quickly, I of course join Admiral Phillips in expressing my condolences to those families, and it's a big reminder that any transportation work is extremely is dangerous and risky. In terms of the effect on the supply chain, I think the effect of knocking out the Port of Baltimore for a fairly limited amount of time it has been incredible what the U.S. Navy and the Army Corps of Engineers and supporting agencies has been able to do to bring that channel, and I think soon the entire channel, back. But I will say, I think it's been a little bit overstated what that will be in the short run, because we have alternatives to the Port of Baltimore. Now this is, so in that sense, I can't imagine it affecting overall inflation in the United States, for instance, those sort of things. That said, my concern is that in the long run, the Port of Baltimore is an extremely important strategic port when it comes to our supply chain. This is a deep water port. In terms of container shipping, it is probably the fastest growing on the East Coast. There's currently 1 container terminal, but there's going to be 2 open there. And if something were to happen to New York, New Jersey, I see Mr. Van Drew here, or Savannah, Georgia, or Norfolk, Virginia, and we didn't have Baltimore as a working, maintained port, that could be a real problem for the United States supply chain. So, you know, it's funny, these ports compete, but when it comes to a disaster like this, they all work together, and it's extremely important that we remember that with Baltimore.
Thanks. The ranking member of the committee wanted to remind everyone he also has gone to Baltimore, so as well. Admiral Phillips already been noted about the small shipyard grant, but could you just reiterate the number, the dollar amount of requests that you've received in the last year?
Yes, sir. For the $20 million on offer last year, we received more than $80 million in appropriations, and we're happy to take that for the record. We could give you historically what we typically receive there, but it's very much oversubscribed, as are all of our grant programs.
Yeah. So when you do those assessments of, say, the 80 million in requests, just so that the number is accurate, is it 80 million of all really great, super great projects, and only get 20 million, or some not, some clearly aren't ready to go?
Sir, anecdotally, I would say that the small shipyard grant in particular, that program, people are either qualified or they are not, and most applicants are qualified. Many are repeat applicants, as you are well aware from your district, sir. People come back again and again and again, and with success over time.
Yeah, we've got quite a number of projects in past rounds doing great work. I was disappointed about the administration's request for the PIDP, which is $80 million. This is not enough, and as I noted, when we did the BIL, the idea was the BIL money wouldn't supplant this money, and what the danger is, if we don't do something like advance appropriations in the future, then we're going to end up with a new standard of something well below what it was before we did the BIL. And so, so on that point, and you mentioned, I think in response to a question, the process that you can use to kind of get these projects moving. But what information are you collecting for the future, so in the future Marriott can go to the administration and say, okay, if advanced appropriations are no longer going to be here, you need to understand the baseline isn't what we had last time. It's 120 or 160 or some other number that was larger before this year.
So, sir, thank you for that question. I think across the Department of Transportation, we are working collectively to develop a significant amount of data collection, which we already have within PIDP, and other modes do as well, to understand what we see over time and what we see as the needs. Now, the other modes are different. Some have formula funds and other things to go with their grants. But in our case, as a full discretionary grant program awarder, we are certainly keeping track of the need, the requests over time, and I can say that, again, we see 3 or 4 times the dollar value in requests versus funding available.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yield back.
Mr. Van Drew, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, offshore wind projects, you knew this is what I was going to talk about a little bit. Offshore wind projects are failing. And we know that the Ørsted 1 project failed off the coast of my district in South Jersey. Proposed projects now have failed in New York. And up and down the coast, many of them are in trouble. Yet for years at this point, the Maritime Administration, MARAD, has been giving subsidies to fund these projects, which many of them seem to be going towards the graveyard. In my opinion, no more funds should be allocated to these hemorrhaging money pits. Just last year, $202 million, almost $202 million were awarded to funding MARAD's budget supports of these ventures. If this money can be better utilized to further fund accounts such as operations and training or assistance to small shipyards, should we really be investing in something that is so obviously now becoming visibly non-viable and only drains our budget for very important work that you need to do? I believe the answer should be no, that we shouldn't be. Rear Admiral Phillips, thank you for being here today. How has the $222 million that was spent, how has that been implemented?
Sir, thank you for that question. It is correct that we have awarded over $200 million in grants to projects for port infrastructure development that have a connection to offshore wind. However, all of those grant projects are in those ports, support work that those ports would need anyway. They improve wharves, they improve transportation in and out of the port, they improve utilities. In fact, in New Jersey alone, a grant was awarded last year. That particular port is in part connected to offshore wind, ostensibly, but all of the obligations and requirements in the application are related to utilities development. So improving lighting, improving sewage, improving water, improving the infrastructure along the waterfront. So I would submit that while these ultimate grant opportunities are in support of offshore wind. The work that is being done to strengthen these ports provides opportunities for those ports irrespective of what their ultimate cargo becomes.
Thank you. If I'm correct and offshore wind turns out to be non-viable, let's just pretend that it doesn't go anywhere. Those improvements are still well spent. You believe they will be utilized even without these offshore wind projects?
I do believe they will be used irrespective of the ongoing work in offshore wind or not.
Do you believe the benefits of the funding outweigh the needs of other parts of MARAD's accounts, such as the ship disposal program and the tanker security program?
So those programs are funded in separate lines, and certainly the discretionary grant program is meant for a specific outcome, which is improving the movement of goods, and it supports that.
I understand they're in separate lines, but money, as they always taught me, is fungible. And, you know, that is the dollars that could be used for other functions, and that's why I think we have to look at this carefully. Do you know if there are plans to ask for more money to fund offshore wind one way or another, even though the funds have already allocated to these projects previously?
So MARAD's contributions to offshore wind support include port infrastructure development, as you have discussed, and also support through our Title 11 shipbuilding program. Those are the two areas where we are most engaged in offshore wind opportunities.
Okay, so I know you can't answer this question in your position, but I was going to ask you, do you believe offshore wind is still a worthy investment? And I know you're going to give me a really good answer that that's not your job to determine, something along those lines. But I would think it's not, and I think that in these really frugal times, as you hear this committee talk about investments that they'd like to see in other areas that are very much needed and are pending, that we perhaps could spend our money better. Appreciate your answers. To me, the offshore wind developments are a waste of taxpayers' money and MARAD's money when it is exclusively for them. I would urge the administration to stop spending money on those projects and for some of these other good projects we have. In my mind and many others, they still actually pose a threat to maritime safety, to navigation, to fishing, to the whales, to the environment, to tourism, and to our utility rates, which I know is something you don't deal with, but our utility rates are going to increase significantly, drastically because of them. So I'm hopeful that we don't go forward with them. Thanks for your answers, and Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Auchincloss, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Maffei, welcome. Appreciate your time. Last year, my colleague, Mr. Ezell, and I sent a letter to the Commission advocating for FMC to use its existing authority to establish a National Port Advisory Committee that would be comprised of public port authorities, marine terminal operators, and maritime labor organization. This establishment of this committee would provide the maritime industry with the opportunity to share their concerns to the Commission regarding potential regulatory impacts on operations at America's ports and marine terminals. Do you support the establishment of a National Port Advisory Committee? And if so, how can Congress help you to implement this?
Thank you, Mr. Auchincloss. I certainly support that we need to hear from all of those groups of people, and we need to hear from them often, and myself and all of the 4 commissioners spend a lot of time communicating with those. I would say on a specific, I won't comment on a specific legislation, but I do think in the long run, certainly it's very important. Here's my concern, and that is that we have one statutorily provided for committee that is a shippers committee, half exporters, half importers. It is a good thing to have, and I certainly support the principle, as I support the principle of what you're talking about. The danger, though, is that the assumption was that it would cost no money. And it does end up costing some money. I'm not saying it's a huge amount of money, but the group has decided that it has, I think, quite a few meetings, not in Washington, We have to make sure that they follow open meeting laws and have IT support, and therefore we're often faced with either having to send a staffer or two across the country. We're not a big agency like Admiral Phillips' agency, so it's even these small. I'm kidding about that. We both come from very modest agencies, but we can't necessarily do that without a specific line item. So I guess what I would say is to make it easier, if you do propose this, then definitely include the funding for it. The last thing I'll say, though, is that if we want to do it ideally, maybe they all should be one advisory committee. I'm not sure whether having 3 or 4 advisory committees is the right way of going about it. It's certainly better than not hearing from these groups at all. But one of the advantages of these sort of committees is that it facilitates not only communication with us, which is very important. It came in handy, by the way, to have the Shippers Committee to find out what each one of them experience was with Baltimore. But it's very important to have an exchange among the various stakeholders. So I certainly support the principle, not sure if I support the specifics.
I appreciate the financial constraints and would support dedicated funding for those advisory committees, and also open to suggestions as you've put forward about how we might synthesize them. And I would encourage you, as I know you do with your background as a member in constituent services, is to continue to work through that shoe leather and getting input from the terminal operators and the ports as your constituents. Rear Admiral Phillips, thank you for your testimony today. I'm a member of the Select Committee on China, and an area of significant concern for me is China's rapidly expanding shipbuilding capacity. Recent estimates indicate that China's current capacity is about 200 times the United States capacity for shipbuilding. And its military and commercial fleets are rapidly expanding. There have been arguments that their quality is below ours. That's debatable, and what is not debatable is that quantity has a quality all of its own. When they're building that many ships, it matters. You mentioned in your testimony the importance of recapitalizing the Ready Reserve Force and the commercial sea lift programs. Can you speak to the importance of the President's budget request and what modifications or expansions of Title 11 you might advocate for so that we can help you build more ships?
So, sir, thank you for that question. As you're aware, Title 11 is a loan program that allows us to support industry in the capacity of being able to build vessels in this country. We have designated offshore wind vessels, vessels of national interest, and have 8 applications underway right now, many of which are related to offshore wind, but not all. And in fact, we are also allowed to loan money to ports for improvements, and we have 1 port loan in progress. So the challenge with Title 11 is that it takes some time, but the good news is that we pay or are allowed to loan to borrowers who may find themselves dealing with higher interest rates if they were to go into another program on the open market. So our opportunity there is to expand capacity, to continue to provide opportunities for builders to gain access to funds, to be able to build vessels, and that, of course, improves and expands our U.S. flag fleet, particularly our Jones Act fleet as well.
Well, as I indicated to you earlier, I'd like to work with your office on legislation around Title 11 to see how we can give you as many tools as possible to widen our shipbuilding pipeline in this country in the most cost-effective way possible. So I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, sir.
Yield back.
Representative Skolton, you were recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, sir, and thanks for having this important hearing. This year's budget request obviously is noticeably smaller. We're going to be hitting on some of the same themes, but I think it's important to distill this. Obviously, the FY 2025 request is about $110.66 million lower, 11.4%. To both of you, can you give us a distillation of the impact on maritime performance as a country, and what should Congress keep in mind as we continue to look to be good partners?
You first. No, you first. Thank you, ma'am, for that question. I think what the industry broadly needs to see from Congress, budget request notwithstanding, we support the president's budget, is a clear signal that shipbuilding, that cargo, and of course we have within MARAD we are very focused on meeting DoD requirements. So we have the fleet that our current requirements and our authorizations and our appropriations provide. And that is largely based on DoD requirements. So signals to the industry that there is interest in sustaining long-term growth in the shipbuilding industry, long-term cargo access for U.S. flag vessels in particular, and that then generates long-term job opportunities for mariners that keep people in industry. So that's my primary focus, is U.S. flag vessels, cargo for them to carry to meet our nation's needs, and a sustained opportunity for U.S. mariners, which will help us bring more mariners in, not only bring them in, but retain them, keep them in the industry, ensuring their safety, ensuring the best quality of life possible for them. So that's broadly the kind of signal that we need to see from Congress so that the industry knows they can move forward. Tying into that is an opportunity to build those ships here, which then gives us an opportunity to build and sustain shipbuilding capacity, which not only supports the broader industry, the Jones Act fleet, but also our military capacity in shipbuilding as well. So it all ties together, but what industry wants to see is a clear signal from Congress that sustained interest and growth beyond the TSP program and things that we've managed to accomplish that have grown the fleet are there and will continue to be there for the future of the industry.
That's great.
As a regulatory agency, of course, our direct jurisdiction doesn't cover most of this, but since you asked,
Yes.
what I will say is the bipartisan infrastructure bill was very important, but it was like a down payment. If we really want to take full advantage of the ocean carriage in this country, we're probably going to need a lot more investment. The issue is that of supply chain resiliency, and I mentioned it a bit with Baltimore, but our ports, but also a lot of the issues that happened during COVID, though there were issues at the ports, actually happened inland. I think I was quoted as saying, if you build a bridge in Indiana, you're still helping me as Federal Maritime Commission Chair, and that's true. The biggest issue probably facing the Baltimore port as we move forward and reopen the channel is the fact that that bridge is down. Wait a minute, what does a bridge have to do with maritime? It has everything to do with maritime. A port is where water meets the land. I would just say, to the extent that you and your colleagues can work on it in a bipartisan way, we could use more investment, particularly in our ports, but frankly, in our infrastructure all across America.
Thank you, sir. Very helpful. One more question. Rear Admiral Phillips, your testimony touches on the U.S. Marine Highway Program, and you mentioned how funding awarded this last year will support 8 projects across the nation. I'm particularly excited to hear that nearly all the funding is supporting projects in disadvantaged communities or federally designated community development zones. Can you share where these projects are, and specifically if any of them are in the Great Lakes region?
So, ma'am, I will take that for the record because I don't think I can spout them out by memory here. But what I would say about the U.S. Marine Highway Program generally is this is a program with tremendous capacity to do more for our nation, and it is chronically short of resources, and there was always an excess in applications for need. The $125 million infusion we got under BIL there was a significant increase in the amount of applications that year, and there's certainly a need, and particularly from an inland perspective, I hear when I talk to inland ports and port operators continually, we wish we could use more money here. This is another opportunity for us to expand capacity, and it works well with PIDP. It can support things in a slightly different way, but there certainly is an opportunity there and an opportunity to move more goods on water, and there's plenty of capacity there. So tremendous opportunity with that program.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll look forward to your response for the record. Thank you. I yield.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't see any other questions. Thank the witnesses for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate that. And with that, meeting's adjourned.